Anna-Stina Treumund was the first openly lesbian artist in Estonia. Work played an essential role in introducing the term queer, inherited from Western theory, to the Baltics and exploring what it might mean there. In addition to being an artist, she was also an ardent activist of women's, animal, and sexual and gender minority rights. Over the last 5 to 6 years, she also became a practitioner and documentarist of BDSM practices and a feminist art house porn photographer. After her biggest solo show to date, titled M's Wet Dream, at Tartu Art Museum in 2016, Treumund sadly passed away last year. She was also one of my first girlfriends, and despite the brevity of our relationship, she was a major influence on my becoming an openly lesbian feminist curator and critic. It is impossible to imagine the past 10 years of my life having gone any other way, but without meeting such an inspiring and outspoken figure, things could have turned out differently for me and for many women in Estonia. The strong influence she had on the people surrounding her as a girlfriend, a friend, or a public figure, including sometimes ruthless, yet wonderful, interviews in the mainstream media, was the catalyst for activist groups that have now grown to be an implicit part of Estonian society. She was a big dreamer. In making her dreams come true, she enacted change and proved that an individual voice can be heard. When Treumund had her first solo show You, Me and Everybody We Don't Know in 2010, the term queer was completely unknown in Estonia's cultural and social scene. The show was one of the first attempts to imagine a contemporary lesbian identity in Estonia. The exhibition opened up conversation about LGBTQ issues by hosting its own seminar, bridging new ideas into contact with feminist theory already familiar in Estonia. Despite a small number of popular books dealing with homosexuality published in the 1990s and 3 pride marches between 2004 to 2007, the rhetoric around LGBTQ rights and equality at the beginning of the 21st century hadn't changed much since the Soviet era. During that time, male homosexuality was criminalized, women's sexuality was generally muted, and a patriarchal gender system that relied on resilient women's labor remained normalized and unquestioned. Queer, 2009, and Together, 2011. Treumund often expressed her frustration with post-Soviet heteronormativity, which prevented people from thinking independently or acting according to their hearts. Moreover, there were no openly lesbian cultural makers for her to relate to. Instead, she confronted innumerable sources of homophobia online, in law, and in the patriarchal culture of the country. As an artist, she made a very conscious decision to create a visual imagery of lesbian women, their lives, and female sexuality in Estonia. The photo series the exhibition took its name from consisted of self-portraits, photos she took with her sister and friends, which she used as visual definitions for terms such as queer or drag. These photos also show her dreaming of a happy love life, in a society where everyone would have the right to get married. In later works, Treumund continued her oeuvre by depicting her dream of leading a family life with a partner. Drag, 2009, and Sisters Baby Gerda and Pussycat Eye. The series Woman in the Corner of Matsu's drawings, made in the summer of 2010, was a queer interpretation of Estonian printmaker Marju Matsu's 1941–1980 prints of single women and women living together from 1972. This was an advance on work first initiated by feminist art historian Katriin Kivima a couple of years earlier. It was both a homage to an artwork which possibly hinted at lesbian desire, and an autobiographical work that expressed a very personal longing for love. 9 months later, Anna-Stina's girlfriend featured in their joint portrait, Together, for the 2011 exhibition Untold Stories in Tallinn Art Hall, which I curated together with Irit Riasberg and Anders Harm. Along with the photo, Treumund presented a short documentary titled Mothers, which featured a lesbian couple with a child and a single lesbian mother with twins, from the Queer Sticker Collection project. Made in collaboration with Jaanus Sama in 2011, Treumund expanded her practice by starting the Queer Stickers collection together with her good friend, the now well-known Estonian gay artist Jaanus Sama. For this project, they invited 12 friends to come up with stickers to conceptualize queerness from their personal point of view, which would then be used to decorate public and private spheres. Since graffiti is illegal in Estonia, stickers were the perfect alternative, appearing in bar toilets and other places across the country. The collections were also given out at certain gathering places, and were wildly popular, with people waiting for the next reprint. Some of the makers were activists, artists young and old, some queer, some feminist, some simply finding an affinity with the message and the medium. This project was ingenious for its format, which invited in and unified both audience and maker in exploring what queer might mean. Was it a history? Was it a question of language? How could it be translated locally? Over the years, the artist gathered a small network of social scientists, historians and archivists working on restoring and expanding the sparse history of Estonian women. For her exhibition Lily, Ree, Frida, Sabine, Eva, Mel, Alfred, Rain and Mari in 2012, Treumund photographed a number of her close friends as historical Estonian women who were either unmarried or had been written about in the newspapers as gender curiosities, that is, they were transgender or intersex. This series enabled Treumund to depict her own community and pay tribute to her longtime historical muses Romaine Brooks and Gluck, who had painted famous left-bank dykes in Fin de siècle Paris and London. As well as this, her exhibition also brought attention to just how little we know about the women of Estonian history and how we know even less about the lives of so-called ordinary folk. From Lily, Ree, Frida, Sabine, Eva, Mel, Alfred, Rain and Mari, 2012, the notion of role-play was also central to Well Then, Jane. Devoted to the importance of dreaming and play in the everyday lives of children, the series and exhibition explored the topic of queer childhood. The title was inspired by Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre, in particular the line, "Well then, Jane, call to aid your fancy, suppose you were no longer a girl well-reared and disciplined, but a wild boy indulged from childhood upwards." In addition to queering childhood stories, this exhibition introduced us to Treumund's new girlfriend, who would go on to reappear in a number of works. Perhaps even more importantly, the fairy tales in this solo show introduced BDSM to Treumund's practice. After this exhibition, she continued to explore various sexual practices and subcultures, and for a short period, she even kept a sub-slave at home. In her video Princess Diaries II, 2014, while dressed in drag and being whipped, she confesses that she has considered turning away from art making to pursue a life as a mother and dominatrix. For a while she took a break from the art world and started photographing for arthouse feminist porn magazines made in collaboration with the Helsinki scene. From her 2014 show Dread, Treumund was involved in a large number of other activities aside from art aimed at promoting queer acceptance in Estonia. She was the initiator of the country's only women's culture festival Ladyfest Tallinn. Inspired by the international Ladyfest format, Treumund was a major influence on many queer and feminist women, artists and curators in Estonia. She was also one of the initiators of a feminist reading group started in 2009, a group that has been referred to more than once as the voice of the Estonian feminist movement. It is no secret that her life was cut short after a long battle with depression. She felt she was not the buoyant spokesperson that activists are usually depicted as. And yet she defied and surpassed any expectations put upon her, and created endless possibilities for others. It is essential to remember her story and deeds. Want more stories delivered to your inbox? Sign up to our newsletter here. How Russia's super-rich make and spend their millions. An ode to St. Petersburg's exuberant spirit. Eastern Europe through the eyes of a new generation. See a generation blossom in Latvia's magical wilderness.